think bluntly that the Leaving Cert should be abolished. We think a very important intervention was made by the ASTI in the course of the last couple of days, where they made an intervention and called for open access to university for all who want to have it, third level institutions. It's a way of saying we don't need to have this rat race of market competition for points, something that puts huge pressure on students, something that kind of crystallizes the inequities that exist within our second level education system, and instead just have, as we have open access to our primary education system and we have open access to our secondary level education system, we should have open access to our third level education system, as does exist in other countries within the European Union. And what students obviously are crying out for right now is clarity. They should have got that before now, and they should get that as soon as is possible. But more than that, we should do away with this absolutely barbaric system, a system that puts huge pressure on young people's mental health, a system that distorts our education system, and instead we should have investment into our third level education system, into our apprenticeships, into ensuring we have the highest quality education system possible. As part of that, getting rid of all of the fees that currently exist, which are a massive barrier to education, introducing a living grant to ensure the students can afford to go to education, and unleashing some of the creative potential that currently isn't able to be reached by those who aren't able to afford or able to achieve going to third level education at the moment. That's a very important call that we're going to be making this week.
So just want to say a few words about the €100, €113 energy issue, and also briefly in relation to the Leaving Certificate. So I understand that the Cabinet are discussing the energy credit this morning. We think that the energy credit is totally insufficient. It's estimated that the average household may end up paying €1,000 and more extra on their energy bills. So to put €100 or €113.50 people's way by way of an energy credit is totally insufficient. In fact, if you compare it to the concessions that have been made by other governments in other European countries, it falls well short of what's happened elsewhere. Spain, for example, is a country where, under pressure from the people, far more significant concessions have been given. We also note the fact that the Minister is bringing the memo to Cabinet this morning without a clear proposal as to what happens for people who pay their electricity bills on the basis of pay-as-you-go. Pay-as-you-go is a significant minority, and it's been increasing in recent times. In particular, lower income and poorer households avail of this facility. And there's no clear proposal in relation to that, and we'll be watching that issue like a hawk. Finally on that, the proposal that utility payments that are paid by tenants on the rent, but the utility bills are in the name of the landlord, and that the credit will be given to the landlord and not direct to the tenant. We think that that doesn't take account of the power imbalance between landlords and tenants, and we think tenants are going to end up being cheated in some cases on this. We think a better way of working that one out needs to be done. Finally, on the Leaving Cert, I'll just say the government must make a decision on this issue this week. The mental health pressures on the Leaving Cert students are bearing down very hard now. So there must be a decision, there must be clarity, and it must respect the views of the overwhelming majority of school students, and actually the Children's Ombudsman, who says that a traditional Leaving Cert must not go ahead this year. That's it.
Slightly overlapping there. First of all, I just want to say that I think people are going to get an absolute shock when they get their bills in January. We're already getting calls from people who've seen their energy bills increase by 125% in their latest bill, and that doesn't even take into account their energy usage in January, which is probably the worst month for people. So €100 back against bills that are likely to increase by 500 to 800 euros over the course of this year is a pathetic drop in the ocean. It's just not good enough, and we've been calling for some time for energy and fuel price controls to be introduced, because we are literally talking about an emergency in terms of the hammering people are going to get with their energy and heating bills over the coming months. Anything less than that is just pathetic, and it is these energy and price hikes are going to really hurt the least well off, the most vulnerable, and the elderly. So we need emergency price controls on energy and heating bills. We need an increase in the fuel allowance, and we need an expansion of the fuel allowance to cover a much wider range of people who are currently not getting fuel allowance support. So that's one key thing, message we want to get across today. The other thing I just want to say, and it's sort of connected, it is absolutely pathetic for Eamon Ryan to suggest that the energy and fuel price hikes people are getting are as a result of the NATO Russian conflict that we're seeing escalate in the Ukraine. Since we deregulated energy and energy production and distribution and the energy companies, we have seen a consistent rise in energy and price hikes since the ESB moved from being a not-for-profit entity to being a commercial entity, and the privatisation and deregulation of energy. So this is the bitter fruits of privatisation and deregulation being manifested in the bills that are going to hit people. What we need to be saying about the Russian thing and the Russian and NATO escalation is, of course, the Russians shouldn't be doing military exercises in Irish territorial waters. Putin is an aggressive autocrat and thug, but the idea that NATO are somehow blameless in this, when NATO have engaged in a very serious eastward expansion, when NATO should have been disbanded at the end of the Cold War, when they are using this as a pretext to try and encourage greater military expenditure in the European Union. NATO, prior to Christmas, urged the European Council of Foreign Ministers to increase military spending. NATO were absolutely as much to blame as Russia in this whole escalation of conflict. And of course, military exercises in this country are not exclusive to the Russians by any means. We have the constant use of Shannon Airport by the US military to prosecute wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and all sorts of Western powers also do military exercises. We are consistent in saying we oppose all military exercises in our territorial waters, or any increase of militarisation, whether it's by the European Union or by Russia. And what the Irish government should be doing is actually protecting our neutrality and not taking sides between two aggressive military blocs.
Sorry, Richard, just on the price controls.
Sorry.
You said emergency price controls to try and manage the cost of fuel. Given the price of the raw materials, how do you suppose they work? Or just give us some insight into what you mean by that.
I mean, the state has to, in the same way as we saw emergency measures taken during COVID, we need emergency measures by the state in order to ensure that the bills do not become unaffordable, as they are going to be, and that means subsidising, if necessary, prices. Personally, I think we need to take the energy sector, energy distribution and production, back into public ownership, but we need to control the prices. €100 is a pathetic drop in the ocean compared to the absolute hammering that people are going to get in their bills over the coming weeks, and €100 just will not cut it.
Just the details of that, you want to check it here, right? Because it's in our motion that we put forward previously. So it's the Consumer Protection Act 2007. There's two ministerial orders would be needed. So Section 61, an emergency order is needed to say that emergency exists in relation to the supply of a particular good. So we would say that you need to say an emergency exists in relation to the supply of electricity, gas, and home heating oil. So you need to pass one ministerial order that is literally a signature on an order. And then you need, under Section 2 of the Consumer Protection Act 2007, you can fix the maximum unit price. So, for example, then you can have another ministerial order saying the maximum unit price for electricity could be 20 cents per kilowatt hour of electricity. Like, the government does have the power to do that. There is very little discussion about it, but it does currently exist under law.
In the UK, they did something similar to that. They tried to set a price ceiling and end up with lots of suppliers going out of business because their raw materials didn't come in cheap.
We would get one.
One significant step that could be taken would be in relation to the ESB. The ESB, up to I think the year 2000, had to operate on a not-for-profit basis. Since the deregulation, that hasn't applied. So at some stage recently, over a 12-month period, the ESB recorded profits of, I think, 343 million. Certainly it was over 300 million euro. So there's scope there for very significant price cuts for the electricity, is still the main electricity supplier, without making it a loss-making company. That could easily be done.
Should these energy supports extend to businesses as well as households?
Well, if you brought in emergency price controls, that would be across the board, caps on the unit price of electricity and energy. So of course it would benefit everybody who's going to be hit, whether it's small businesses or whether it's householders and consumers. But our biggest concern, obviously, is for people who are literally having to make choices between buying food and turning on their heating. Excess winter debts are very significant. Even before all this in Ireland, we're one of the worst countries in terms of excess winter debts. So we're extremely worried about the elderly, about low-income households who pay a disproportionate amount already to heat their homes, and they are going to be absolutely crucified with the bills they receive over the coming weeks, and the government needs to take emergency measures as a matter of absolute urgency.
Okay, thanks folks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.